All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today on the people issues that face a lot of companies. I'd love to start with a few introductions. I'll start with myself and then go around the room. Kristin Speer, I'm the partner in charge of executive capital for Advantary, and this covers all of the needs that companies may have for their executive teams and also the performance of their companies. So we'll get into the content of how that has changed and the challenges for CEOs and companies and their boards have evolved very quickly. And so there are some issues that companies need to catch up on in most cases. But for right now, I'll let you know that I have done executive search in a number of ways. I've done recruiting for tech companies since it feels like the dawn of recruiting, but it was from when companies exploded during the dot-com era. And I have built recruiting kinds of functions for staffing startups for venture capital, Mayfield Ventures, Trinity Ventures, Crescendo Ventures, some of those specific programs that would build their companies very quickly, as well as 6 years at Korn Ferry in their technology division, and then worked exclusively with some founders to grow their teams over time. I'm currently leading the technology practice for Advantary and simultaneously Westwood and Wilshire, which does a complete functional build out of executive teams for companies that are scaling up. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ganesh. You're next on my screen. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Hi, Christine. Glad to be on this call. My name is Ganesh Tai. I'm the CEO of Never Lose the Deal. And what we do is help technology companies improve their sales efficiencies and increase their win rate and win more deals. Been in the tech industry for 25 plus years and have seen a lot of pain and churn in the sales force arena, where it's not only difficult to hire the right people for the right roles, but also employee churn has huge ramifications on revenue growth and whatnot, right? So I'm quite curious as to what we had to learn here today.
Okay. Hartmut, you're next on my screen.
Sorry, you said Hartmut? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning. And thanks for inviting us or inviting me. I am an executive coach and consultant after a 35-year executive international role with several multinational companies. And I'm particularly interested because as an executive coach, as you can imagine, executive capital is a big portion of that. And in fact, during my career, I almost was very, very close to actually joining Egon Zehnder after 45 interviews. And that's another story. But so I feel very, very close towards this topic. So looking forward to our conversation.
Okay. Jason, would you like to give us an introduction to yourself?
Thanks very much. I serve as the Customer Success Manager for Advantary Capital Partners, as well as freelance independent project manager.
Okay, great. And Betsy is running our program here. So thank you, Betsy, for putting this all together. Let me advance here to say that it has been cited in many sources. So what keeps CEOs up at night are all these pesky people issues. People are dynamic. The dynamics between them change, and it's something that you can't just fix once and it never changes. So these are some examples, and I was going to ask, are there any particular issues that you'd like to address? I mean, churn came up as one, employee churn. Any other things top of mind that are like, that always happens, or that is something I've always wanted to know how to avoid? Anything come to mind?
How to deal with egocentric leaders.
That should have been top of the list, right? All right, that's a good one. All right, we'll get into that. As I alluded earlier, things are really changing. I mean, yes, some of the basics are the same in terms of people are people, but the relationship of companies to their people has been changing quite a bit. The pandemic kicked that forward several years in evolution with the different generations of workers and how people expect to be managed. It's really changed. And in a nutshell, what is required by companies is to get much more involved with what their people's lives are and what matters to them, particularly if you have a hybrid or a remote workforce. You have to understand what is driving those people to work for you and how to keep them on board. So the issue of churn comes up here quite a bit. And this is a big challenge for companies to look as to how can I make the employee experience something that's not only rewarding, but is sticky to my company? What are the intangible things I can do to tie them to me? An example of what some companies have done is they provide pet insurance, because that's a benefit that, you know, a lot of people were buying on their own, and people got a lot of pets during the pandemic. And, you know, it's just a small example. But I think the overall message is that you need to be very thoughtful and think and really explore what your unique employee base is going to want and address that as much as you can. Some of the standard things are about career progression, about personal development and professional development as well. All of these areas that before were kind of on the fringe, maybe big companies thought about them a little bit, but they weren't that central. They become totally central to companies right now, no matter the size. So this is driving a big change in the number of headaches a CEO can have and the type of headaches a CEO has. And then you have diversity and a whole bunch of things that come in. But the point is that there's a real different world now. You have to think about it differently than before. So fundamentally, what I have seen for companies who are successful is that the CEO has to have someone who's going to tend to that in a very focused manner. And in the world of HR and managing your people, there's been a real bifurcation of issues. So everything that has to do with the administration of HR has pretty much been automated to a very large degree. You have companies like Countsy or TriNet or, you know, any number of those who are fulfilling the basic administration of benefits and of onboarding. Many of those administrative tasks are at the level where, you know, you don't need the hordes of HR people to do that. That's fairly automated now. What is not automated and seems to resist automation is the dynamic interaction leadership of people. What we've been talking about, getting to know your employee base and knowing what they want. That is one level of HR or people management, I would say employee base. But it all starts actually with a very healthy, functioning executive team. So before you can really address the employee issues, you really do have to think about the executive team. And what I have observed in working primarily with, you know, funded companies that are scaling up is that the more experienced the CEO, the earlier they bring in a strategic HR person onto their management team, reporting directly to them usually. And so there are two purposes for this. One is that, yes, all that hairy stuff about HR and the people is, you know, delegated to that person. That gets it off the CEO's desk. Whew, huge relief to have somebody senior, competent, who can handle that. But the other thing is that putting someone in that role helps to stabilize the dynamics on the executive team. So, Hartmut, you were saying these egocentric leaders, and when you have companies that get funding, they have these top people in the industry, and they all have big egos typically. And the other thing a CEO needs is someone to help ground and manage the executive dynamics. So this is the other reason why it doesn't work to put in a junior HR person. You need someone sitting at the table who has managed this kind of situation before and can help keep the team together, tamp down and manage through potential conflicts of personality, what we're going to do. This person has this almost, you know, it's almost an invisible force that they can bring to help the CEO manage through it. And sometimes it means managing the CEO. So for the team. But this is what I've seen in companies as small as 60 people. They are bringing on someone that will be involved with the team. Before you have that many employees, there's an alternative here. I think that's one of the, what I'm talking about has led to the development of a very, very strong HR search practice here at Advantary to put out these kinds of leaders into companies. But not every company is ready to hire a full-time person. So there is the option to put in someone who's more of either a mentor to a very, very early stage CEO under our CEO mentorship program, or you can have someone that is a part-time or interim person at that level. But whatever it is, you need someone dedicated to your team, someone who understands the people and will be consistent with them over time. So I've done a lot of talking. I want to pause and see if there are comments or questions at this point. Okay.
So did I understand correctly, Chris, that HR is becoming an essential part of this top executive team reporting to the CEO and as part of the leadership team? Is that
absolutely?
That it is. I'm glad to hear that, because yeah, I don't think it was so some years ago, right?
I know HR has always been sort of the, you know, the stepchild, and it's their overhead that's just a drain on us. But the times have changed, and if people are not getting that kind of facility to their growth on the people side, it can quickly fall apart.
Yeah.
People issues are really hard to fix. It's so much easier to avoid and to set it up right than to fix it after the fact. So the other thing,
not just considered as HR, but more as people leaders and people.
Yeah, HR is kind of an old term, and I debated about what term to use here. In fact, what we've seen is that the titles have changed. Often they'll say head of people and culture, or your chief people officer, or whatever, and that is a more current term. I'm just using HR because it's easier to put on a slide than people officer, and also I don't want to convey that it has to be a C-level person at the top salary. I mean, an experienced person at even a senior director or early VP level can be very effective, given, depending on the company, but you need someone who's been around the block and can handle those personalities.
Right.
What about at board level, Chris? As people with HR background, is that a norm, or is that happening perhaps as well?
I missed the first part of your question. What about a what?
So at board levels, is this
at board level?
Also at board levels, where one of the members definitely has an HR background or experience or something that makes.
I don't know why there are not more people on boards with an HR background. It befuddles me, to be honest, because a really experienced, good chief people officer or CHRO, they've done a ton of financial management. They understand all the levers of the business in terms of cost and the people. I think that the skill set for a real strategic HR person is immense. They also have a lot of the legal, practical legal background, and advise CEOs from that. I think one of the reasons, if I were starting a tech company as a CEO, I would get a really experienced HR person on fast, is because they're going to help me avoid a lot of legal issues at a lot of cost. You've got your retainers to the attorneys, and every time you call them, that's super expensive. But a lot of these HR leaders, they've seen all this. They know how to avoid it. They know what to do when you have a problem employee. They know how to manage them out, or they know how to address it. And you will save a lot of money. And you will also have better outcomes with someone who's in the company to manage through difficult things. So I think both fiscally and just from so many perspectives, those skill sets are super important. And on the board, I can't agree with you more. I just do not know why boards are not recognizing how useful a person like this might be. So it's a great question. Thank you. So in terms of all of these issues that keep the CEO up at night, I think there's basically two paths to think about. I want to take these in reverse order. One is to get out ahead of issues. And that's what I've been talking about a lot. If you bring in or get somehow the right advice, the right people to work with, you will avoid a lot of issues. And that's the number one thing to do in my mind. So there are lots of different ways to do that, but basically we will need someone who can work very much and have the trust of your internal team, whether that's the executive team, the board, or the employees. So that usually means a hire. And so that's why even if it's a head of HR or a VP of HR, the sooner you get them on board, the better. Now, this means they have to have the right skill set. They have to be able to handle those issues. It's not just giving someone the title. It's looking at the experience they have. I know that in our HR search practice, there's no problem getting candidates. That's every functional area has certain challenges. There are a lot of HR people sifting through the stack to find the right one and get the nuances correct for the person and really verifying their skills to put into a company is where the hard part comes. So the other track is never waste a crisis. And I think that this is where most of the pain comes for CEOs. There's something that's gone off track. And I have some examples that I've lived through. And I think that the main message is move decisively when there is a crisis. I think the pain for the CEO comes from the fear that everything's going to fall apart if my chief revenue officer leaves, or if my CTO decides to retire, or any of these catastrophic kinds of changes happen. So here are some just quick case studies. I was working with a CEO actually on a different search for his company, and I had interacted with his VP of finance. And that person, I could tell, had some issues just in how they interacted with me. I mean, it was not hard to see. So his choice at that time was, well, it's really hard to, I don't know, I mean, they're really good at what they do, but their team doesn't like them and they've threatened to quit. And so what he did, which was the right thing, is he actually up-leveled the role to a CFO. And he wasn't sure he was quite at the point to get a full strategic CFO, but he moved up that timeline so that he could then make the VP redundant. And it was an extraordinarily big win. It turned out that happened right before the pandemic. So he had a strategic CFO to go through the pandemic with, which probably saved a lot of, their operations at that time. So it worked out. The others have to do with really assessing if you have someone who's leaving. You have to remember that while it's painful to lose someone, it's great to gain a good, strong person on the team. And employees will respond to new leaders. So I'm sure you may have seen this, that actually replacing someone, even if it's someone you really loved and you didn't want to see them go, it can be a gift if you get the right hire. So being careful about hiring is another topic for another day, but getting the right hire makes a big difference. Any other examples you folks want to talk about that you have seen with people issues and how they were resolved? I have a couple of other case studies we can talk through, but they're kind of covered here in summaries.
What kind of assessments do you recommend for executive team alignment?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number that are out there. A lot of people use Hogan. There's any number of them. What is important is to get the right facilitator for the assessment. You need to, have the tool, of course, but how you talk with the team, getting someone with enough gravitas to pull that off, I think is what's key. If you don't have a senior person kind of doing that, someone who's been experienced, then I think it looks cheesy. If you have someone who's just kind of a tool jockey doing that, you really need someone who's been in the corporate world doing the assessment with you. I think that is a very important part. Or have someone do the assessment and you have a senior person sit down and interpret it. So I think that's more important than the precise tool. Now, some consultants run a couple of different assessments to get at different aspects. One of the current latest searches we did, which is actually, I think it's this one. We replaced a founding CTO. Actually, he was also CEO, but then when they got investment, they brought in a different CEO. So he remained as CTO, but he was 70 or better. So he was pushing retirement, but since he'd been the founder for, I don't know, 15, 20 years and run the CTO and the engineering operations that long, replacing that person was a big deal. So this is a company that has investment from FTV, the private equity firm, and they have a person on their staff that does the Hogan assessment and works with executive team members. We did another search for this company, and they run the Hogan with their consultant out of FTV to actually look at the team and see how anybody they hire will fit into the team. And so that was what happened on this one. I do want to do a note of caution about assessments. I think that they're good, but they're not great from my perspective. They can have false flags, they can miss things, so they're not gospel. I mean, they can be informative, but I feel like sometimes it's a little bit, it's not gospel. So you have to take it with a grain of salt and also use your own judgment when you're using these things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
you shouldn't take it literally, but you should see the trends.
I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that it can identify areas where you want to understand somebody better. But I've never seen it come out and say, this person's an asshole. You just don't pick that up on an assessment. So you don't see how they treat their team. All these other things that are critical are not on the assessment, but it can be very insightful in how someone might operate or make decisions or, react to things or, things in those areas. This is the other one I mentioned that had the VP Finance that, if people are good in some place, but really bad kind of for the team, that's a non-starter. I mean, if you don't have anybody if you have an exec who's not keeping their team happy and motivated, that's going to bleed out in the employee base in the company. So I think that one of the things CEOs need to do is to lean into those issues sooner rather than later and really address them. So here are a couple of things that these are tales of caution. One of them is a founder that we worked with that created a cult-like culture. Everybody had to go through the founder to be hired. And that person, of course, was looking for someone who really loved what the company did and would just gush about it and basically stroke the founder's ego. Made it impossible, really, to hire good candidates. And the hiring process took forever. Everybody, even if they were being hired into finance, had to do a presentation to the management team. It was ridiculous. And it held them up. And what happened is that the good candidates that came through, the really exceptional candidates, they didn't stick around for that. They were snapped up by other companies, or they said, look, I'm not doing that, or a number of things. So I really, I love startups, but sometimes if it's a cult, it's just death to the people on the people side of things. That's going to be a recipe for disaster downstream. So another one is interesting case where the company hired an executive and it came out that the political views of this individual were at odds with the company. This happened during the pandemic, and the person hired into a biotech company was an anti-vaxxer and didn't believe in the science behind the vaccines. Now, it is incomprehensible to think that someone in that industry wouldn't respect the science there, but that's what happened. This is really tricky because you can't fire someone for their political views, but their performance was spotty, and it just obviously was not a good fit. So eventually the executive took another job. The replacement hire is fantastic, but to be very honest, if they had managed that executive out earlier, I think it would have been good. They lost 8-10 months of this person managing their sales force that, really, it didn't kill the company, but it didn't help them for a lot of reasons. So if there is a misfire, I think it's better to move fast rather than to wait. You need to do it in the legal way, but I think if it's a misfire, both sides usually know.
It sounds like this one was not just political clashing, but also science.
Well, right. I mean, it was a very odd thing that came to light later, right? Interviewing, you don't ask about that sort of thing. How can you know, right? So anyway, but that happens. Okay. So just in summary, I think that some of these points are relevant. And again, they really come around to hire strong people sooner in your growth for the stability of the team. And don't be afraid to wade into people issues, but have strong mentorship and partnership on handling them. That wraps up.
Excellent. Very insightful.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Kristin.
Great job, Chris. Really good.
Oh, thank you.
And you guys were good attendees with all your questions and interactions, so thank you.
You were great attendees.
It's ironic, Chris.
Oh, I forgot to do the commercial at the end, but I kind of.
No. I'm going to have you stay on, and you're going to do a couple of sound bites for me, so we can use it for. I've been messaging back and forth with Stephen because there's still a lot of value in what took place today with the content that was recorded, and plus, keep in mind we have the contact information of those who expressed interest in these services, so there can be. It's the success of this isn't just based on how many people attended today, is what I'm trying to say. Is there's still a lot of there's still a lot of use out of this, and I don't want anyone to think that this was potentially a waste of time, because it's not. So with that said, I'll have the attendees drop, and Chris, we'll just take 5 minutes, and
Sure.
I jotted down a couple of phrases I thought were really good that I could cue you with, and maybe we just do a couple 30-60 second.
I have a question for Ganesh and Hartmut before you go.
Yeah.
I have sort of a reservation about naming names and so forth, and talking about companies with the problems. I hope if you were an exec at one of those companies I named, would you have felt awkward? Do you think I went over the line? I mean, I wanted to give credit.
You didn't name, right? As far as I recall, you didn't name. I think
Well, Agiloft was in there,
Yeah,
and the company super. I did.
Okay.
I
think in a public forum like this, I would stay away from names unless we've got some sort of permission to do so, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
Are they on your website, Chris, under news and blogs, though? If you have them there.
We did a press release for those.
Yeah. So they approved that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's already public knowledge then.
And I did a record. Well, yeah.
Those press releases would have been more positive spin, though, than real talk about what the situation was.
True.
Yeah.
So
anyway. I would stay at the industry or a top player. I think in the pharmaceutical company, right? You kind of stayed at the right level. You didn't give it the name, but you said it's a pharmaceutical player, etc. Right? So I think staying at that level, I think is
yeah. The only thing that I feel was I would do differently. I wish I'd done differently. Is to talk about the super one where the VP finance was not a good manager of the team. But I put it in because I feel like you need the specifics to understand the drivers. So anyway, I'm conflicted about that, and
I think the cases are good, but you can leave out the company, or as Ganesh suggested, get their approval, right? But the cases is still relevant. It doesn't really matter that much where that happened or what.
Yeah, I wish I had. Right? I didn't need to, like on the ones that were bad, I didn't put a company on it, right?
Good.
And I tried to just use two that were good examples of things that had gone. So, okay, I'm just gonna bite my tongue. In the future, I'll do it differently. But anyway, the only thing I'm worried about is that the VP Finance, and I identified the company name, so people could go back and look and find out who that was. I mean, that's where I have gone over the line. Yeah, the chances of that are, nil, but that's where I felt weird.
Yeah, I think better to be cautious, right, with these, because I think credibility and confidentiality go kind of hand in hand, right? So.
Do you want us to keep editing it out then, Chris?
If it's possible.
Okay, we'll take a look at the recording and see what we can do. Yeah. I don't want anyone to get in trouble, so. You
can just take the slide out and take the label out, the name.
Yeah.
The name.
Actually, I talked about both of those cases. We can just take both of those with a company logo. We could just take it out.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll take a look at the recording and see what we can do. Great.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Whenever you want, Chris, I have another case for you. Actually, through Korn Ferry, who were the ones who were trying to hire me, was a culture type CEO, and that's a long story. But if you ever need a case, I could take you through that.
I would love it. Yes.
Yeah, it's well, he actually became quite famous. He then went elsewhere from his own company, and actually now he's been the CEO of 2 or 3 large, well-known conglomerates actually. So yeah, you would pick out quickly who it is.
Well, there's always C3 Tom Siebel. There's always people like that and so forth. Yeah, so just among us chickens, we can talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
He works with like more public example of something, right? That that happened more recently. Uber, yeah.
Well,
bad examples. Yeah.
The first one I thought of when you talked about this culture, this cult type culture, I thought of WeWork.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's the first one I thought of when you brought it up.
That's what came to my mind as well. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Well, and as a matter of fact, Apple was like that in the early days too.
Possibly.
Yeah. Jobs. So anyway, but yeah, those are really difficult cultures, man. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate
you very much.
Going up.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm just looking for something that we can tease people with, intrigue them with, and you can say, I'm Chris Spears, I'm Advantary Services, or we could actually lead with, you wrote some good things like never waste a crisis, get ahead of issues, it's painful to lose, but great to gain. How do you do? So it might be like you actually start out with the problem. Did you know, or, having these things can, and then finish with, I'm Chris Spears, I'm with Advantary Services.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. If you'd like to learn more, let's get in touch. Let's get ahead of the game. Let's get ahead of the issues together or something like that. You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to, instead of with an introduction, let's tease them with a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And they don't have to be long. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to go mute and just take a beat and record and say something. And then if you want to do another one, pause, give me some cut, give me enough room to cut.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me, I want to get my screen.
Yeah.
Exit full screen. There we go. Because I wanted to get some of the problems up here and
yeah, that would be great. Maybe let's take 30, 60 seconds on like 3 different problems or something.
Yeah.
And then, if you want to learn more, let's get in touch. If you want to get ahead of the issues, let's get in touch. If you want to,
Right, right, right.
You know what I'm trying to do.
So I think I would go back to you're a CEO. You know, if you're a CEO and the people issues are starting to, you're losing sleep over people issues, you know, maybe this or that, and then say, instead of stressing, get help. Here's how, you know, there are ways to solve these problems and get ahead of them. Okay.
Yep. And then what I'll do is when I post these, I'll put like a link to, you know, or you can say, get in touch with me on LinkedIn or however you want to do it. And I'll put like a link in the comments or something, but I'm just going to let you run with it. And when you're done, just be done. And if you like, say, if you want to say, oh, I want to do that over, just do it over. I'm not going to interrupt because, you know, you're going to get into a flow and I don't want to interrupt that. And just make sure
my background to be my room. Maybe I should change.
No, it's blurry. It's fine.
It's okay.
Yeah, you're totally fine. Because we're going to put your name and your logo. I'm going to edit your name and logo on it, on the video.
Okay. I'm terrible at this, so I'll just do some stuff and I'm terrified that anyway, you'll put it out there.
You actually did. Will see it. The workshop was great. The workshop was great. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to go mute. So just do a few takes.
Okay.
And then we'll go through and see where we're at. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. Here we go. I'm Kristin Speer, and if you're a CEO who's losing sleep at night over people issues at your company, there's a way to get help. You may have issues with okay, we're going to cut. If you're a CEO and you're losing sleep at night because you have people issues in your company, you're not alone, but there's also some ways to address it. You may have a key person who just quit, or maybe you have culture problems. You may have compensation issues and you're not able to hire because of internal equity issues. Maybe you have disagreements on your management team. All of these are typical issues that CEOs face all the time. The ones who succeed at them get help from advisors and from competent people who have been there before and have an expertise to handle these kinds of things. That's what the executive capital session is. Okay. I was doing well towards end. That's what the executive capital service at okay. That's what the executive capital portion of the Advantary offering. What is it? What am I calling it? Practice. Okay. That's what the executive capital practice at Advantary is designed to address and help. There are a variety of consultants and hiring services to help you succeed on the hiring. And okay, that's what the executive capital practice at Advantary is designed to address. We have unique programs and senior consultants who can help clean up these problems and help you avoid them in the future. Please let us know what you're struggling with and what's keeping you up at night, and we'll discuss how we can be of help.
Bravo. I can splice that together. That was very good. Did you just freeze? I think you just froze. Did you hear me? I said, bravo. That was good. I can definitely splice something together from that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. And then could you do one? Because I think it's really powerful to talk about not waiting. Remember how you said there's a cost to waiting? And I think you should just talk to me like you're pitching me. Like when you go in and pitch the services,
right.
You just speak from you freely, right?
Right.
So I think hitting home to CEOs, there is a cost to waiting too long, right? And you know, the part about there may be some pain, but the gain is greater. So
right.
And then if you're interested in learning how to navigate that, or if you need to know how to navigate that, whatever the words are, contact me. Okay. All right. I'm going to shut up.
All right. Let me think of it. Okay. I think a lot of stress for CEOs comes from painful people issues. They're really messy issues, and it's difficult to know how to move forward. There's a lot of fear that goes into what's going to happen if my key employee leaves, or something's going wrong between people in the company. And it's really difficult. It's very messy. So the main message I'd like to give to CEOs is move fast, and decisively. The longer you wait on people issues, the worse it's going to be. And there is such a cost that will spiral on you if you wait too long. So the main thing is get advice, get action moving quickly. If you have to replace someone on your team, you will go through short-term pain, but long-term gain. Getting a new terrific person on your team is such a breath of fresh air.